RWBY Volume 7, Chapter 2 A New Approach. One of my biggest worries about Volume 7 was how they were going to treat Ironwood. Throughout Volumes 4, 5, and 6, it has been shown and hinted that Ironwood has been becoming increasingly paranoid, and this was only reinforced by the first episode of Volume 7. While this is not a bad thing, it does present a challenge to the writers. It means they have to maintain a very careful balance with Ironwood if they want him to remain a good guy. It would have been very easy for them to overdo it. That's why seeing Ironwood being so reasonable and open with RWBY and the others was a very pleasant surprise for me. Ironwood could have kept everyone around him in the dark, but he chose to trust people. He has told Penny, Winter, and the Aesops about Salem and the relics. I love that almost as much as I love him behind Qrow. Yes, that happened this episode, and it was amazing. But I digress. Ironwood's openness does not end there. His plan is to restore global communications and reveal Salem's existence to the world in hopes of uniting them against her. Now, I am not going to talk about why his plan is good or why his plan is bad. What's important here is to understand why Ironwood is doing what he's doing. Oswin tried to keep everyone else in the dark, and that failed. That's why Ironwood has chosen to try something new. Unfortunately, Ironwood is still in the dark regarding some very critical pieces of information. He doesn't know that Salem is immortal, and he doesn't know because RWBY doesn't tell him. Yeah, RWBY lies to Ironwood. Once again, it's important to understand why this happens. Keep in mind this is all happening during the same day as the Volume 6 finale. RWBY and Co have been in Mantle for a couple of hours at most, and they have been in Atlas Academy for even less than that. Lots of things have happened, and the first impression our protagonists get out of Mantle wasn't a good one. To make things worse, the information they have is bound to have a huge impact on Ironwood. It's natural for them to want to play it safe for now. Does that make them big hypocrites? Absolutely, I'm not denying that. I'm just trying to explain what leads them to making that choice. Depending on how this development plays out in future episodes and what repercussions it has, we could be seeing the beginning of a very interesting plotline. In other news, I like how the reunion between Waze and Winter was handled. It hit all the right emotional notes, which makes it more jarring that they both have the Penny RWBY reunion the way they did. Another thing this episode did better than the previous one is the humor. There are plenty of comedic moments this episode, and they all managed to hit the mark. I'm not saying this episode made me laugh, but it did make me smile. As an aside, I guess I should mention this episode was written by one of the new writers, Kiersey Burkhardt, and directed by Connor Pickens, making it the first episode where Miles and Kerry aren't at the forefront. Much like last episode, there are a couple of interesting details in the background. For example, there is this message board where it says Penny is the employee of the month, and it confirms that Robin and Jax are taking part in the election. I missed this on the first episode, but during the opening, Robin is shown next to the Show Your Class graffiti. Maybe it's her campaign slogan instead of a hint about a future Faunus plotline? Then again, it could be both. We hear a little more about Robin from this protester, who apparently likes throwing bricks. I found him amusing and an entertaining way of delivering exposition. As you can expect from her name, Robin is likely based on Robin Hood. Considering Robin Hood is famous for stealing from the rich and giving to the poor, the idea of using a character based on him for the Atlas Mantle plotline is a bit clever. Robin even has her own version of the Merry Men, the Happy Huntresses, an elite team of graduates from Atlas Academy who chose against joining the army. They could provide an interesting contrast with the Aesops. Curious enough, they don't appear in the opening. Considering how much she's being built up, I'll be disappointed if Robin just ends up being the quote-unquote good alternative to Jax. I hope she ends up being more complex than that. The sequence with what's at the end of the episode was good. It shows just how much control he has over Mantle, as well as gives some insight into what he and Tyrion are doing. Also, it puts the scene of RWBY and Co being watched by the camera in a whole new different light. At the same time, it does raise a couple of questions. For example, why has Ironwood not bothered to update Mantle's code? It seems like a weird oversight on his part. If I have to pick a negative about this episode, it will be Blake talking to RWBY. And I know that's going to make some people scratch their heads, but hear me out. Think back on any conversation Blake and RWBY have had since Volume 6 started. What's the plan, RWBY? What do we do, RWBY? We are behind you, RWBY. It's like they took the complaints about RWBY and Blake never interacting and decided to address them by giving them the most generic by-the-numbers interaction possible. Regardless, a new approach was a definite improvement over the first episode. Of course, a lot depends on how they handle the issues established here. Is Ironwood as nice as he appears? Or are we just waiting for the other shoe to drop? Will Ruby lying to Ironwood backfire, or will she be portrayed as being in the right? How will Ruby's actions here affect her eventual reunion with Hospin? Will we see Ruby and the others talk about this next episode, or will they just follow her lead without saying anything? Those are all things to keep in mind going forward. Till next time everyone, the name's Guy, and I hope you like what I had to say.